Yeah. So a couple of things I wanted to continue to cover from following up on last night, which are one has to be very careful in reading a Rishon. So, and not everybody realizes how we have to be careful in that respect. For example, one of Rabbi Slipskin's pieces of evidence that Chazal, I should say the Rishonim, believe that the thought council is located in the kidneys is a Ramban in the beginning of Vayikra, Perikal Pasuk Tes, where he says that you sacrifice the kerev and kloyos, the innards and the kidneys of the sacrificial olah, because those are the clay hamachshava v'ataiva. Those are the kalim of the thought and of the desire. Now, the way Rabbi Slipkin translated kalim, it was the vessels, meaning this is the place where the thought and the desire reside. And therefore, he said, there's just like Chazal say in Maseches Brachos, kloyos yoatzos, that the kidneys give counsel. So to the Ramban is saying that the kidneys are the place of thought. But it's not true. First of all, the Ramban himself writes in one of his other works, the drasha called Torah Hashem Tamima, he says that the reason I put tefillin on, and so Rabbeinu Yoina says this in Brachos too, Rabbeinu Yoina was the Ramban's mechutan, their children married each other. The reason I put, and we say this, many people say this every morning, the reason I put tefillin on the head, it says in that little prayer before Hanachas Tefillin, anybody remember what it says? Valarosh keneged hamoach, sheneshama shebemochi, yachin kol shar ayivarai, etc., etc. That we put on tefillin on the head corresponding to the brain, because the neshama is in the brain. So the Ramban, in fact, says this. That's the source of this is Ramban Rabbeinu Yoina, and the Ramban says that the neshama is in the moyach, which he calls merkeves haneshama, the vehicle, the chariot of the neshama. So clearly, the place of the neshama is not in the kidneys, as Rabbi Slipkin would say that he wants you to believe that the Rishonim believed, but rather it's in the mind. So there's a commentary on the Torah called the Tziyoni. The Tziyoni probably raises negative connotations in some people's minds because it sounds Zionist, but it's actually one of the Rishonim, Reb Nachum Tziyoni. And the Tziyoni was one of the Rishonim who were Mekubalim, one of the rare Rishonim who were Mekubalim, like the Ramban and Rabbeinu B'chai. And he says in his Perush that, which parallels the Ramban, he very often explains the Ramban, he's much more elaborate. And he says that the kerev and the kloyos, the innards and the kidneys, are the kalim with which the machshava is motzi el hapoal, its plans. They are the tools by which the thought brings its plans to fruition. Meaning, the word keli can be translated as vessel, but it obviously should not be translated as vessel, because the vessel for thought is what Ramban says is the head. Rather, it means that they are tools. There is a brain, but the brain just plans. The brain uses the rest of the body to execute its plans. And the Ramban and the Tzioni there say, of course, that's why we sacrifice also the legs of the animal, because the legs also represent, the capacity to execute the brain's commands. So therefore, the Ramban is not saying that the kloyos are yoatzos. They have counsel like the Gemara in Brachos, but he's saying that they are the entity which execute the tools by which the brain fulfills its mission. Now, then he raises me Rabbeinu B'chai. The Rabbeinu B'chai says that Rabbeinu B'chai also parallels the Ramban. Very frequently the Ramban and Rabbeinu B'chai elaborates on the Ramban. So Rabbeinu B'chai has a slightly different language than the Ramban and the Tziyoni. He says that Sheisrof, that you bring the kerev and kloyos sheisrof, to burn, klei ha'etzav ha'machshava, the kalim of the counsel and the thought, she'iskimu b'chet, which agreed with the sin. So, what's electrified Rabbi Slivkin is that the word Eitzah appears here. And Eitzah is the word which is used in regard to the kidneys. Kloyos yoatzos. Right? So he was wrong on this count too. Although I haven't yet seen posted my response. This is the last thing he posted. And I don't see what he didn't post my response, so I'm sure he will, but it's not there yet. Which is Rabbeinu B'chai himself says, in Parshas Breshis, the end of Parshas Breshis, he says explicitly that the place of a person's machshava is his moach. The machshava takes place in the brain. Now, according to Rabbi Slivka, I don't know if it's true or not true. He says that according to Aristotle, the brain is like a big air conditioner. It doesn't do anything. Just, it cools off the blood. But you see, obviously, that Rabbeinu B'chai knew that the machshava, the thought, takes place in the brain, not anybody else. That's a fascinating thing. He says when a person wants to meditate, a person wants to impact. I should really find this language. It's really an interesting idea which he has. Just give me a second here. Yeah, no, it's not the one. So before he says that the seichel resides in the moach, but there's one which are a different. Oh, here it is. Here it is. Listen to the very fascinating Rabbeinu B'chai. Perek Vav, Pasuk Vav, in Breshis. He says that kilev ha'adam, the heart of a person, klei hamachshava, it's the tool of the thought. Haboy love klei hamachshava, haboy love min hamoach. It's the tool of the thought which comes from the heart. V'chein tireh, and so you will see. Ki harotzel yizbodei. Somebody wants to meditate. Yizbodedus is a language Rishonim usually use for meditation. Okay, literally means to isolate or put oneself, but really they use it for meditation. So yizbodedus lamshich shefa machshava, and to bring down the flow of thought. Yokuf rosho, he'll bend his head. V'yachshov, and think. Kidei sheyered shefa machshava, so that the flow of thought will go min hamoach, from the brain, shu makor hamachshava, which is the source of the thought, el halev, to the heart. In other words, when a person meditates, I guess also when a person davens, you don't daven like this, right? You don't meditate like this, because then the machshava is facing upwards. Rather, you meditate like this. So the machshava is facing downwards and impacting on your heart. So I don't think that he's talking because something happens inside the body that way. Doesn't make a difference, obviously, but rather because the pose you adopt when you meditate has an impact on the outcome of the meditation. So that's why, in Shemona Esrei, it's a discussion about how you're supposed to stand during Shemona Esrei, because how you stand impacts upon the kavanah which you're going to have. Now, so Rabbeinu B'chai, obviously, even though he said that the kleos are kerev kleos, the innards and the kidneys are kleo etzav machshava, the vessel, the kalim of the counsel and of thought, he doesn't mean the kalim in the sense of vessels. The vessel is the mind, but rather they are tools by which the mind accomplishes what it's supposed to accomplish. Now, another thing which Rabbi Slivkin wrote, and he kind of degraded, denigrated is the right word, is he quotes a Chidah. The Chidah, Reb Chaim Yosef David Azulai, was one of the great Talmidei Chachamim of the 18th century. I don't know if I ever told you this. I'm sure I mentioned in the past, but not recently, that the Chidah his main job was, he was a Meshulach. He went around raising money for the Jewish community in Hebron. And he was big time a Chacham, so wherever he went, he used to look in libraries, either of individuals or public libraries, and he found lots of exotic Sfarim, which he writes about. In fact, he wrote like a bibliography of all the Sfarim he could find, called Shem HaGedolim. But he also writes about things he found in the Sfarim. So he also has a travelogue called Magal Tov, about his travels, raising money, how it went. So I have to tell you that he writes very pejorative stuff, bad stuff, about the ancestral hometown of Bechofen. He says they're basically cheapskates and misers, and they didn't give him very much money. They were nasty to him, and they gave him some lousy conveyance. He writes, they didn't give me this kind of carriage, they gave me this kind of carriage. I don't know what the difference is, but obviously not what he was accustomed to riding to get from their town to the next town. So, fortunately, the person who he mentions is not in my direct line of descendants, ancestors. Not direct line of ancestors, at least as far as I know. But, the Beckoffers have a long history of being cheapskates and skinflints. Anyway, actually, there was a lady who contacted me from Germany last couple of years ago, because this I knew. But there's a woman, a German woman, who was doing her doctoral research on cattle dealers in medieval Germany, and the Beckoffers were cattle dealers. That was one of their primary sources of income. Anyway, so the idea of the Chidah writes is that he wants to say that Kloas Yotzos does have some literal meaning. It's not just metaphorical. And he says that now they discovered, I don't have the exact language, Rabbi Stephen quotes it, they discovered with a microscope that there's a pathway between the brain and the kidneys. So it shows that the kidneys have an impact on the brain. So Rabbi Slivkin, when he quotes this, he says, he quotes some doctor who said, well, it probably just means that there's a circulatory system. And the blood, of course, goes around the whole body. And also goes from the kidneys to the brain. Which, would be no big deal. So what I found today, actually I saw it yesterday for the first time, but today I did more research on it, is that the adrenaline glands are on the kidneys. And the adrenaline glands control, don't ask me how because I don't understand how this works, serotonin in the brain. And so these glands have a direct impact upon your mood. Because serotonin, was too much, more is good, right?
More makes you feel good. Yeah.
More makes you feel good, less makes you feel bad. So you see that the kidneys do impact upon the brain. They make the brain either function better or function worse. So I found that to be an amazing thing. Wow, the Chidah in the 18th century, maybe this is what he meant. This is a very, very holy fellow, the Chidah. You don't know what he knew and didn't know. Maybe he somehow figured this out. So I wrote that to Rabbi Slivkin. So I read back, so now you say the Gemara is not a metaphor anymore. Now you want to say the Gemara is literal. It's telling us medicine. So I said, listen, I don't know either way, but you don't know either. Right? That's the point. It says, if you can't assert something if you don't know with certainty. So the last thing he wrote me today, he got really nasty to me today. It was really nasty. The last thing he wrote to me was, if you don't know the answers to any of my questions, perhaps more accurately that you profess not to know them or refuse to think about them, then there's really no point to our discussing the topic. What's the point of having a discussion with someone who claims to have no idea what anything means or even what he himself thinks about things? So, he missed the point. The point is that none of us know. We don't know if the Chazal meant, we can give as far as, but we can't say with certainty, Chazal meant this or Chazal meant that. Say, maybe they meant this, maybe they meant that. Who is Natan Slivkin to come along and say, this is what Chazal meant? and therefore they're wrong. You can't do that. This interesting thing, there was a big machlokes between Rabbi Emanuel Rackman and Rabbi Soloveitchik back in the 1970s. There's an umdana which is brought down in the Gemara. The umdana means something which Chazal assessed to be true. And that umdana is tav l'meisav tandu mi l'meisav armalu. A woman would rather be married. What? Yeah, so it's the end, right? It's in the end of the parent?
No, beginning.
No, it's being a parent. Oh, right. So tav l'meisav tandu l'meisav armalu. A woman would rather be married even to a jerk. I think it says even there's a very small person. What? Yeah, the meisav than to be not married, than to be single. So, because of that, one of the ramifications of that is that you can't be mezakeh a get to a woman. You can't be zoiche. In other words, if I can acquire something on your behalf, even if you're not aware of it, because it's zachin l'adam shlo b'fanav. We do something which is a benefit for a person, even if he's not around. But with a get, even if the husband is a louse, a jerk, a lowlife, a terrible person, you still can't be mezaiche and a get for his wife, because there's no concept of tavla meis of tandu, because tavla meis of tandu. Because a woman rather remain married, even to a jerk, than be single. So Rabbi Rackman came along and he said, you know what, this no longer applies. Nowadays we know, women would rather be single than married to a jerk. So therefore the halacha changes. And since the halacha changes, therefore now today we can be mezakeh a get to a woman. We can bestow the get on her, so to speak, if we know that her marriage is a bad one. Eventually what Rabbi Rackman went on to do, when that was not enough, he went on to annul marriages. That was what he was infamous for, that he made a basin to annul marriages. And but this is earlier on. So Rabbi Soloveitchik, the Rav, got up at an RCA convention of Rabbinical Council of America, and said he regrets to do this because Rabbi Rackman was, I think, a talmid of his father's and a friend of his, or maybe also a little bit of a talmid of his. So therefore they were close. But what he said was apikorsus. Why is apikorsus? Because an umdan of Chazal is a din like any other din. When Chazal say, this is the halacha, that's the halacha. Even when they say an umdana, that's also halacha. You can't go against an umdana, a reckoning, a determination of Chazal as to human psychology, any more than you can go against a halacha of Chazal. Now, in my opinion, this is a very brisker approach. Because in brisk, everything is a din. This is a din this way, this is a din that way. Everything is dinim. That's how the terminology they use. And they view things as being very, very black and white. It's either a din or it's not a din. It's like a binary system. Right? Yes, no. But my position would be, in line with what I'm saying about this issue of the brain death, is that it's not that we know for sure that it's halacha. But we don't know how Chazal determined it to know how to overturn it. They didn't leave us a message and say, listen, Rabbi Isai, this is how we determined this. We took a Gallup poll among 1,000 women ages 18 to 64, and this is the results we came up with. Because then we can conduct another Gallup poll and say, okay, it changed. But since they didn't tell us that, so we don't know if they're coming from some assessment or some profound insight into human nature, so we don't have the tools to override what they established. Now, this is not, just give me a second. There are cases where we can override the rabbis, according at least to Rav Moshe Feinstein. I mentioned this several times. It's good to mention this context too. Rav Moshe has this revolutionary tshuva, very dangerous tshuva, in which he says that in our day and age, it's mutter to clap and to dance on Shabbos. Even though there's a takana, an enactment, a decree by Chazal not to dance and clap and dance on Shabbos. Why? Because there's halacha by Gzeira D'Rabbanon, that a Gzeira which was not niskabel b'Rob Yisrael, a Gzeira, a decree which is not accepted by most Jews, is null. Now the Gemara says, Yeah, but it's supposed to be nullified by a Beis Din. And the Beis Din, for example, Rabbi Yehuda and the Sia, the grandson of Rabbi Yehuda and Nasi, they saw that people were not being careful, meticulous about a much earlier takana concerning shemen akum, forbidding oil made by a non-Jew. And therefore, they came and said this takana is null and void. So Moshe's Chiddush is that this can happen any time in history. Anytime you see that a gzeira is lo nispashit b'rov Yisrael, that a decree, which maybe once was accepted by a large majority of Klal Yisrael, now no longer is accepted by a large majority of Klal Yisrael, the gzeira falls off. He says you don't need a Beis Din of smuchim. People have real smicha, like a Sanhedrin, to make that determination. Anybody can make that determination.
Anybody like Moshe Feinstein.
Sorry?
Anybody like Moshe Feinstein.
What about an Amaretz?
What do you mean Amaretz?
Like anyone.
It's a statistical thing. Go out. You can go out and check it out. See how many people are refraining from lapping and dancing. See how many people are not.
And march on Agudas.
What?
Petition and march on Agudas.
Petition.
I mean, like, who, like, what level of a person do you have to be in order to do that?
He doesn't say. According to him, it sounds like anybody can do it as long as they can note this in some way, shape, or form. And he says that experience shows that people now clap and dance on Shabbos, so therefore it's no longer awesome.
What about the tzera for men not to dress, not to do the way of the woman?
It's the Raisa. They can't do away with that.
We don't, but we do say like, if the majority of men, it's no longer a woman thing.
Oh yeah, it's the same idea. Yeah, it's a similar idea.
How does somebody can you elaborate on that?
In other words, let's say we decided today to try and subvert Yom Tov Sheni. We're going to eliminate Yom Tov Sheni, right? We don't want to have to start them anymore. So one Seder every year, right? So now 5,000 of us get together, right? And we decide we're not going to keep a second Seder. So we will burn in hell for it. Because right now there's still Gzeira Rabbanan. But the next 5,000 people, they won't burn in hell. Because, according to Ramosha, because the Gzeira was already, I don't know if 5,000 obviously not enough, but I'm, simplifying. The Gzeira was already nullified by the first 5,000. The same is true of Lo Yibash Gever Simas Isha, right? A person shouldn't wear a woman's clothing, right? So the first 5,000 people to wear that article of women's clothing, they're burning in hell. The next 5,000 people, they're not so bad.
Rabbi, don't you think a lot more stuff would be done away with if they realized that it could be done away with?
No, because you have to be like Amalek. It says Amalek, what was their special thing? They saw a hot bath, and do you know that Medrash? Medrash says that Amalek, what they did is, I think it's Rashi in Dvarim, says, yeah, the Pasuk says, Karcha Baderech. So cooled you down on the way. The article doesn't bring this down.
It doesn't say in the Rashi?
It says in Rashi. It says, the nations of the world were afraid to fight against the Jews, and Amalek came and jumped into the fray. And it says it's analogous to a hot bathtub, that no creature can go into it without getting scalded. One jerk came along, says Ben Blial, which is a bad person, and jumped in, and even though he got burnt, he cooled it off for everybody else. So the first 5,000 people have to be willing to get burned in hell, right? As a result of having transgressed this to the Rabbanan.
Once it makes a birth,
No, it's not retroactive. No.
What do you mean by it's not retroactive?
They at that time they transgressed the prohibition. They don't get retroactive dispensation.
What if in the same generation?
No. There's no retroactive dispensation.
Okay.
Doesn't work that way. Because the issue of not listening to Rabbanan is to be sar, to deviate. Lo sosur. Don't deviate from that which they tell you. So the first 5,000 people, they deviated. Okay, so later it wasn't deviant behavior anymore. But at that point they were deviating, they were rebelling.
According to this question, for Isha should be permitted?
What? Kol Isha? The question is whether, again, Kol Isha is not Gzeira D'Rabbanan. No, it's a statement made by the rabbis. Kol Isha Erva. We don't know if it's a D'Rabbanan, the Raisa, the Pasha, but Kol Isha, let's get this clear, even though it's a bit of a radical thing to say. Kol Isha is not actually Osir. What's Osir?
Seeing her while she's...
No! No! The Taiva is Osir. Chazal tell you, don't listen to Kol Isha because you're going to be over on Lo Sosur Chel Bavchem V'Achrei Nechem. No! It's not a Gzeira. It's not a Gzeira. I need a ritva on Kiddushin.
Okay, we'll do this after class. Let's go back to our main topic.
What?
We could do this after class.
The ritva? No, it's important. Why is this not part of the main topic?
No, is it? I don't know.
Yeah, it is part of the main topic. But the main topic is whatever we talk about, isn't it?
Yeah, but we had a topic with Brenda, and I don't want to take up that part of it. I know, that's why
he always does that. He asks a question off topic, and then he tries to cover up by saying, well, Rabbi, don't you think we should get back to the topic?
Because I didn't realize it was going to be the tangent that was going to be one to answer, you know? Yes or no.
Right, yeah, sure. Go try to fool somebody else.
I didn't know the Rabbi was going to go ask for a ritva that's not in the room. So we're going to wait until somebody brings what's the translation.
Anyway, what the Ritva says, I read inside when Chagai brings it back. The Ritva says is that all the prohibitions which have to do with physical contact between a man and a woman are all relative to the person and to the time. It's a very dangerous Ritva. I really shouldn't tell you this Ritva. What? The year would be the same thing, sure.
So wait,
Yeah.
So wait a minute. So then
He doesn't say it's okay. He said if you're subhuman, like most men are, so it won't be okay. But if you're actually human, like a few men are, it might actually be okay.
But yichud then shouldn't be a problem.
What? Yichud is a gzeira.
Okay, so then again we'll go back to our previous answer that since most people...
Right, if most people didn't keep Yisr of Yichud, then that would fall off.
No, so whether from community or not from community?
From community.
From community. That's over the more orthodox or the Haredi?
The Ma'aminim b'nei Ma'aminim.
Well, that's fine.
Right.
Like that way.
Yes.
What if someone has a very, very old friend that's a female? And before, let's just say me, and before becoming religious or whatever, you know, we used to hug. We were close friends. We're still close friends. So where does that fall in the Gia?
It falls into the parameters of the Ritva.
It is okay.
The Gemara says, when I tell you what the parameters are, the Gemara says that Ula, when he used to come home from the base marriage, he used to kiss his sisters on their breasts. So the Gemara says, no, let's not go that far. So I'll just tell you as it is, right? I told somebody last night, I said, you know, my job in my shir is to deprogram the Bachrim from Kiruv rabbis. So I tell them the things that the Kiruv rabbis didn't tell them. So I think this is one of the ones that the Kiruv rabbis don't tell you about. That Ula Menashe, what?
That's how I was let off.
Oh yeah? Yeah. So I'm sorry, now I feel bad about Chagai.
So it's okay to hug her.
What?
It's okay to hug her. Like
if you don't have it, listen.
Since you've seen her,
if you don't really have a taiva when you do it, and you're just doing it because you know Chil Hashem, etc. Yes.
well, that's your friend.
What?
Oh, Chil Hashem.
Chil Hashem. Thank you, Chaim. I'm sorry it took so long. I really would not have done it in such a wild goose chase. It takes so long. You know what? It's out to the Ritva. Even Yichud is shy for this. He says we're concerned about Yichud, and also the idea that about yichud. Hakol lefi das yira shamayim. Everything based on the level of a person's yira shamayim. V'chein hilchasa. This is the halacha. Hakol lefi mashu adam makir ba'atzmo. It's all based on a person recognizing about himself. Im roi lo lasos harchoko liyitzro oseh. If it's suitable for him to make a distancing because of the strength of his Yetzer Hara, he should do it. And one can even adhere to what it says in Gemara Avodah Zarah, now to look at the clothing of a woman, even if she's not wearing them. When you recognize yourself that the Yetzer Hara is submissive, the couple flow, and subjugated to you. Vein malet tina klau, and it doesn't cause anything disgusting to come up at all. Mutar liloli stakel u'dabri ma'erva. He can look and talk with a woman who's forbidden to him. U'shol b'shlo meishasish, and to inquire as to the health of a married woman, which some people, which according to some shittas is also. And behind Hadid Rabbi Yochanan, and that's like Rabbi Yochanan says. Rabbi Yochanan, the Yosef Shayfil used to sit and learn by the riverbank where the women were toiveling. The women were needles, right? And he said that it didn't bother him. Lo chashi Yetzer Hara, right? And he says he brings down several other cases, including Rabada Bar Abba, who used to take the kala on his shoulders at a chasna and dance with her on his shoulders, and he wasn't concerned for a hearer. But Ritva says, don't delude yourself. You should not believe in this unless you're a great chassid. Shemakir biyitzro, who recognize Yetzer Hara. The local Talmidei Chachamim bochim biyitzreim, and not every Talmid Chacham should trust their Yetzer Hara. Yeah, so like it says there that a whole bunch of people, even in that sugya in Kiddushin, like there's a famous case of Nura Bei Amram, where there were two girls in Rav Amram who had been redeemed from captivity, and Rav Amram put them in his loft and took away the ladder, which is a ladder which usually took several people to move, and in the middle of the night he got a great taiva, and he moved the ladder by himself, and he was going up the ladder, and then he shouted out, there's a fire, and his Talmidim came, and they said, woe to us that you embarrassed us, and he said, it would have been worse if I hadn't called you, etc., etc. So you see, even people shouldn't necessarily trust themselves. But it is a relative thing. So Kol Ish is really the same thing. If you had somebody who could go, first of all, let's say hypothetically, right, the opera. Allegedly, I don't know if it's true or not true. Allegedly, they've been sort of gone to opera. That's what they say. Okay, so to be melamed chus on them, right? So what we were going to say is that, well, first of all, of course, obviously, if your business is opera, you can go in any events, right? That's the head of Avidatayu Tori. For money, Jews can do anything. But if a person can say about himself that he has no Yetzer Hara at the opera when the fat lady sings, right? So then, in theory, he can be matir for himself. The question is who's honest with themselves and who's not honest with themselves. That's obvious, right? Because many people don't have that capacity to be truly honest with themselves.
Where's that there? What's the other?
Lo sasu achrei levavchem achrei nechem. Shilhurin. Machshava, yeah. Yeah.
I'm about to get us back on topic. I apologize.
No, wait. So I asked you once before about seeing a woman sing, or knowing what she looks like, and even if she's like one-legged, one-eyed, ugly and fat, or whatever.
Right, so you're not supposed to trust yourself. Unless, again, if you have this great...
Maybe not in every situation. But.
Okay, because there people get turned on. That's what it says. That people get turned on by anything. Yeah.
Okay, bring us back to the topic. I saw that Rabbi Slipkin quoted a Gemara, not so much quoted, but paraphrased the Gemara on Bracha Samach Aleph Amud Aleph. And over there it talks about that he wanted to say that Brisa speaks about kidneys advising the heart, and the heart deciding, and then there's the esophagus and the throat. It talks about a lot of things that Chazal say about it. I wanted to say that was like a literal Gemara, But to me, it says it seems the exact opposite because the whole.
You could say punk fucker, it's okay.
Okay, fine. It seems the exact opposite.
Yeah.
That the whole context of that Gemara is entirely metaphorical about the Yetzer Hara. So it talks about the Yetzer Hara being like a bug. It talks literally all the Gemaras surrounding that are.
You're preaching to the choir. I think it's a davar pashut. That you're right. I think it's a davar pashut. You're right. But everybody has the Yetzer Hara. One of the Yetzer Haras that everybody has is if you come up with a chiddush, you want to defend it to the end, and that's a debating. That's what debate is all about. You will know. You know you're wrong. This happens to us all the time, right? This happens to me all the time. Less now than as I get older, it happens less frequently, but it still happens. I know I'm what. No, I'm more humble. Imagine what I was like 30 years ago. It's terrible to even contemplate. But a person knows he's wrong. He knows that he's saying is basically absurd, but he's put himself into it, right? And especially if you've written something and you published it, how far are you going to go in order to maintain that what you're saying is correct? So it's a tremendous Yetzer Hara. So, with my Erevin Sefer, my book on Erevin, Baruch Hashem, nobody has ever caught me being too lenient. Only too machmir. So, from their perspective. So, but the point is, when I get a letter, which happens every so often now, less than used to, but I get and it's taxed me at that point. So I'm not going to give in. It takes a long time for me to concede and say, okay, well, maybe he's right. So here Rabbi Slipkin has this whole thing that he knows science, and science is supreme, and Chazal didn't really know, and so once you have that axe to grind, you take it further as far as you can. Yeah.
Also, what does he hold about the psukim in Tanakh that mention kidneys advising people?
He sidesteps that. In other words, he hasn't discussed the psukim. He starts with Chazal. But years ago, Rabbi Slivkin got in trouble for other things that he wrote.
Right.
So one of the reasons he got in trouble was I'm not saying this because I take necessarily pride in it, but inadvertently it was because of me. Because not of a book that he wrote, but in an email conversation, which took place, back then there were no blogs. So there were discussion groups. It still exists. I voted discussion group. It's much less popular than it once was. So we had a discussion about the Mabul. And he holds that, at the very least, he holds that it's possible to say the Mabul never took place at all. And it seems that he held, at least at the time, that it's probable that the Mabul never took place. And he said the reason why he rejects the entire concept of flood is because there's no geological record for the flood. Right? In other words, where they took core samples, drilled out a core of earth from the ground, going down many, many layers, thousands of years, they didn't find evidence of the flood.
We have fossils of sea creatures that can never lay.
Yeah, so?
So how did they get there?
No, he'll tell you some earlier cycles. That's an age of the universe thing. But so I had said to him at the time that I think that to say the Mabul didn't take place is completely unacceptable because, I didn't want to say that it's what?
We can read between the lines.
Yes, but because if Chazal didn't tell us that it's a myth. Certain things it tells us in the Psukim are not kipshutom. But if Chazal didn't tell us about this, it's a myth. Chazal thought it was real. And the Masorah is it's real. So if you come along and then undermine it, why stop there? Why not go for Avraham Avinu? Why not go for Matan Torah? Where do you draw the line? There's no archaeological evidence for Matan Torah. Now, what do I mean by that? There is archaeological evidence for Matan Torah, in fact. But it's not definitive. it's subject to interpretation. And the fundamental idea also in science is that science is constantly learning. In other words, the fact that they didn't find proof yet today doesn't mean that tomorrow they won't find proof. So you can't take the fact that science has not yet found something and say that it proves that this thing which the Torah describes, and not just the Torah, the many cultures which have the flood story, that you can't say that it didn't occur on the basis of your science. So that was that in essence is his perspective going back for years, and somehow that got to certain people, that conversation, and that got him in trouble. So, but that is his approach.
Okay. So you're saying he won't comment on Sukkim? Because it seems, I tell you the obvious argument to me is...
What he'll tell you is, I think what he'll tell you is that God knows that it's only a metaphor, but Chazal didn't realize it.
But Shlomo is Tehillim, Mishlei, like Shlomo Melech, David Melech.
So they knew too.
Okay, so now you already have an argument in the sense that people for, hundreds of years, let's say, David, Shlomo, understood that it was meta and they spoke metaphorically. Then all of a sudden, come the Tanoim or Amoraim, and they have a change of heart. And they change their Messiah from being metaphorical to literal. And then Rishonim, once again, have a change. To say that there was a change in the meaning would probably require a great burden of proof.
I would think so. I'm on your side of this, so I'm only going to go so far playing devil's advocate.
Okay, fine.
I can't go further. Obviously you can write him this question on his blog and see what he answers.
Okay, so I understand there's a whole Halachic discussion here, but at the end of the day, his opinion, what sway does it have in halacha? Like, is anybody really a paskin like him? I mean,
so the problem with Rabbi Slivkin is that because he is a martyr, because he was banned and rebanned, and so therefore he's become an icon, and he has far more influence than a 35-year-old dabbler in science and in Torah should have. He's not a major Talmid Chacham, he's not a major scientist. He's a smart person. But he has the influence far beyond what he should be having. And that's what's dangerous about it.
Now, what if all the Gemaras and Midrashim that seem to prove Chazal knew science very deeply, it's a famous Maaseh of Rabbi Yeshua ben Hanania, that one of the philosophers, or one of the people advisors to I think it was a Roman king, asked probably Reb Shimon ben Gamliel in front of the king, how long does the snake take to have a child? And he tested it for 7 years, this scientist, and this, whoever it was, this Rav, didn't know, and he walked out, and he was very sad. Rabbi Yeshua ben Hanania ran in, why are you sad? I didn't know the answer to this question. Rabbi Yeshua ben Hanania told him, no, it's obvious, it's like a pasuk in Bereshis, and here's the answer, 7 years, and he came back in a moment and told him immediately. Meaning, it seems quite clear that there were definitely things in anatomy and things like that Chazal did know science.
Right, so there's a fascinating book, which is not, used to not, and now there's this amazing website called HebrewBooks.org. HebrewBooks.org has done probably the greatest service in years and years and years to Klal Yisrael in terms of scholarship, because this fellow has put up gazillions and gazillions of svarim which you would never have access to unless you went to JTS or some other place, and here they are at your fingertips. So one of them is a book I saw years ago, and I just looked for this week because this came up, and I had no dream that I would ever be able to get it again. But there it is. Talmud Madoi HaTevel. Talmud Madoi HaTevel is a fascinating book. It was written by a fellow who was evidently he was a Breslover Chassid by origin. He lived in Stanislav in Poland. Then he moved to the Bronx, and then he moved to Eretz Yisrael. He died in 1937. Rabbi Yekusiel Aryeh Kamelhar. And in this book, if you just look at the table, I have it here. I downloaded it. I can show you. If you just look at the table of contents, it's amazing what he goes through. People like Rabbi Slivkin, they dismiss such works. They consider they dismiss them by saying they're apologetics. That's what they say. They don't. Once you say something is apologetics, then you basically cut off all conversation. Because that means you're saying that, they wrote it because they felt under attack, and therefore I don't have to really deal with it. Let's see. I think this over here. I have a very slow computer, I'm sorry.
Where is Anas Stefan? He lives in New York area? Or
What?
Does he live in New York area?
Oh.
Anas Stefan.
He lives in Israel.
What is he famous for? I've heard
Hey, Chamish. He wrote lots of books.
Really?
What does it mean when the books have been around? What does it mean? Not to own them, not to read them? What does it mean exactly?
It's unclear. It means they're bad. So,
So what happens if you read a book that doesn't carry?
nothing happens to you unless you're influenced by it. So he goes through. He has English subjects here. So it goes through. It's not English actually. I guess it's German or French, but you'll get the idea. Come on. Yeah, so just starting here for astrostatic, astrology, atomiatry, atmospherology, aerostaticry, atomistic, algebra, agrostrophy, etiology, allegory, apologetics, bacteriology, macrobiology, biochemistry, botany, chemistry, chiromania, it's magic, surgery, chromatology, dermatology, it goes embryology, entomology, all these things he derived, and it goes on and on and on. I'm sorry? It's in Hebrew. It really should be translated. So, and it's mineralogy, meteorology, all these things where Chazal have, amazing foresight about these things. So, my understanding of the situation is that Chazal certainly had things in which they have very profound insights. They're very holy people, like Ruach HaKodesh. They didn't necessarily have insights, because in some things they did only know the science of the times. So I don't think there's a consistent level at which you could say that they were always at level A or always at level B. Sometimes they're way advanced, and sometimes they're up to date. It depends on the area. But obviously Rabbi Kamahar goes through here is how he wants to show how they had ideas, they had knowledge in all these areas beyond what one would expect for the time.
How come this book is unfamous and it's published, translated?
Every book needs a mazel. The Tzaddik says that. He says, don't think because one person's books are better sellers than another person's books that he's a bigger Talmid Chacham or bigger tzaddik. No, there's a mazel for books as well. Rav Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, the poor fellow, right? The Ramchal, for 250 years, for 200 years after he died, nobody was reading his books. All of a sudden, 1930s, started growing. Except for the Siyas Hashem, obviously, which is read all the time. So everything has a mazel. Sometimes a book is discovered, hundreds of years later, it becomes popular. What? The Meiri is another good example, right? So every book has a mazel. Maybe some of the big Shesh will be popular too. All right, Rabbi Zayt, see you next week in Mitzvah Hashem.